Los Angeles, 1971. The soundstage was massive, cold, and buzzing with controlled chaos. Cameras on dollies. Boom mics hovering overhead. Grips adjusting lights. Makeup artists making last-minute touch-ups. The air smelled like fresh paint, wood dust, and coffee that had gone lukewarm hours ago. This was Hollywood. And Bruce Lee stood in the middle of it all, waiting. He wore a simple black shirt, his hair swept back, his expression neutral. Around him, crew members moved with practiced urgency, setting up the next shot. Stunt performers stretched in the corner, running through their choreography one more time. The energy was tense, professional, and a little skeptical. Bruce had been in Hollywood for a while now, but he was still the outsider. The martial artist trying to break into an industry that didn't quite know what to do with him. He wasn't white. He wasn't a traditional leading man. And his approach to fight scenes didn't match what audiences were used to. In Hollywood, fight choreography was theater. Big swings. Dramatic poses. Exaggerated reactions. It was about spectacle, not authenticity. The camera needed to see everything clearly, so movements were slowed down, telegraphed, performed with space and timing that had nothing to do with real combat. Bruce understood the game. But he didn't agree with it. Today's scene was supposed to be a turning point in the film, a tense confrontation where his character faced off against 3 attackers in a narrow corridor. The choreography had been rehearsed for days. The stunt team knew their marks. Everything was planned. But when Bruce ran through the sequence earlier that morning, something felt off. He moved the way he always moved, fast, direct, efficient. No wasted motion. No theatrics. Just clean, explosive technique. It was over in seconds. The director, a veteran in his 50s with decades of action films under his belt, watched from behind the monitor. His face remained impassive, but his body language told a different story. Arms crossed. Slight frown. A long pause before he spoke. When he finally did, his tone was flat. It doesn't look real. Bruce stopped mid-step. The crew went quiet. The stunt performers glanced at each other, unsure how to react. The director stood up from his chair, walking slowly onto the set. He wasn't angry. He wasn't dismissive. But there was doubt in his voice, the kind of doubt that comes from years of doing things a certain way. "Make it look real," he said, louder this time, as if clarity would solve the problem. Bruce stood there, calm. He didn't flinch. Didn't argue. Didn't explain himself. He just listened. The director gestured vaguely toward the space. "Right now, it's too fast. The audience won't see what you're doing. They need to follow the action. They need to feel the hits. Slow it down. Give it weight. Make it dramatic." Bruce's face remained unreadable. Inside, he understood exactly what was happening. The director wasn't asking for realism. He was asking for the illusion of realism, the Hollywood version, where everything is choreographed for maximum visual clarity and emotional impact, even if it sacrifices authenticity. But Bruce also understood something else. Words wouldn't change this man's mind. Explanations wouldn't work. This wasn't a philosophical debate. This was a film set, and the director needed to see it. So Bruce didn't argue. He simply nodded. "Give me one take," Bruce said quietly. The director raised an eyebrow. "One take." "One take," Bruce repeated. "Let me show you." There was a pause. The crew watched, curious now. The director studied Bruce's face, searching for arrogance or frustration. He found neither. Just calm certainty. Finally, the director shrugged. "All right. One take. But if it doesn't work, we do it my way." Bruce nodded. "Fair enough." The crew reset. Cameras repositioned. The stunt performers took their marks, a little uncertain about what was about to happen. They had rehearsed the slowed-down version. But now Bruce was calling an audible, and no one knew exactly what that meant. Bruce walked back to his starting position, rolling his shoulders slightly, loosening his neck. His breathing was slow and even. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He was just preparing to do what he had always done. Move with truth. The assistant director called out. "Quiet on set." The soundstage fell silent. No one moved. Every eye was on Bruce. The director settled back into his chair behind the monitor, arms still crossed, waiting. "Rolling," the camera operator said. A beat of silence. "Action." And Bruce moved. Not the rehearsed version. Not the Hollywood version. The real version. The first attacker came at him from the left. Bruce's response was instant, a short, sharp deflection, his hand redirecting the punch while his body shifted off the center line. In the same breath, he delivered a straight punch to the attacker's chest, stopping just inches short. The speed was explosive. The control was absolute. The attacker stumbled back, more from the shock of the near miss than any actual contact. Before anyone could process what had happened, the second attacker lunged from the right. Bruce spun low, his leg sweeping out in a tight arc, stopping just behind the man's knee. The stunt performer dropped into a controlled fall, his body trained to react even though Bruce hadn't actually made contact. The third attacker hesitated for half a second, a natural human reaction to seeing two people neutralized in the blink of an eye. That hesitation was all Bruce needed. He closed the distance in a single step, his hand snapping forward in a palm strike that stopped a hair's breadth from the man's chin. The third attacker froze, eyes wide. And then it was over. Total elapsed time, maybe 4 seconds. The soundstage was dead silent. Bruce stood in the center of the corridor, breathing normally, his posture relaxed. The three stunt performers were on the ground or frozen in place, staring at him with a mix of awe and disbelief. No one moved. Have you ever been told your truth didn't look right because it didn't match someone's expectations? The camera operator blinked, then glanced at the director. The director sat motionless, staring at the monitor. Finally, he leaned forward slightly. Cut. The word hung in the air like a held breath. No one spoke. The crew remained frozen, unsure if they had just witnessed something brilliant or something that had gone completely off script. The stunt performers slowly got to their feet, exchanging glances, still processing what had just happened. Bruce stood where he was, calm and composed, waiting. The director rose from his chair, moving slowly toward the monitor. He replayed the take, his eyes locked on the screen. His expression was unreadable, no anger, no excitement, just intense focus. He watched it once. Then again. Then a third time. Finally, he looked up. He paused, searching for the right word. That was different. Bruce nodded slightly but said nothing. The director stepped onto the set, standing a few feet from Bruce. His tone was quieter now, less certain. I couldn't follow it, he admitted. It was too fast. The audience won't be able to see what you did. Bruce met his gaze, his voice calm and respectful. That's because real fights are fast, Bruce said simply. They don't last long. They're not clean. They're not dramatic. They're over before you realize they started. The director frowned, still wrestling with what he'd seen. But this is film. We need the audience to understand what's happening. If they can't see it, they won't feel it. Bruce took a small step forward, his tone still measured, still patient. What they'll feel, Bruce said, is danger. They'll feel the speed. They'll feel that this character isn't performing, he's surviving. And that's more real than anything you can choreograph. The director crossed his arms, defensive but listening. In traditional fight choreography, Bruce continued, you slow everything down so the camera can capture it. You add pauses. You add reactions. You make it theatrical. And that's fine, for theater. But it's not real. He gestured toward the stunt performers, who were now standing off to the side, still catching their breath. These men are professionals. They know how to sell a hit. They know how to fall. They know how to make it look good. But when I move at real speed, their bodies react differently. They flinch. They hesitate. They freeze. Because their instincts recognize real danger, even when I'm stopping short. The director's frown deepened, but he didn't interrupt. That reaction, Bruce said, is what the audience will feel. Not because they can see every detail of the technique, but because they can see the truth in the response. One of the stunt performers, a wiry man in his 30s, spoke up hesitantly. He's right, the man said, his voice still a little shaken. I've done 100 fight scenes. But I wasn't acting. My body just reacted. The director looked at the stunt performer, then back at Bruce. There was a long silence. Bruce didn't push. He didn't need to. He had made his point. Now it was up to the director to decide whether he was willing to trust something unfamiliar. Finally, the director exhaled slowly. Show me again, he said. But this time, I want multiple angles. I want to see if we can capture it in a way that works for the edit. Bruce nodded. Of course. The crew sprang back into action. Cameras repositioned. Lighting adjusted. The stunt team reset, now with a new sense of respect, and a little nervousness about what was coming. This time, when Bruce moved, the crew was ready. And once again, the sequence was over in seconds. But this time, the director watched it from 3 different angles. Wide shot. Medium shot. Close up. He studied Bruce's footwork, the way his body shifted, the precision of his strikes. He watched the stunt performers' reactions, the way their eyes widened, the way their bodies tensed, the way they moved instinctively even though they knew Bruce wasn't going to hurt them. When the director reviewed the footage, something clicked. He saw it now. The rawness. The authenticity. The way the speed created tension instead of confusion. The way the lack of theatrics made the danger feel more real, not less. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his jaw thoughtfully. "Okay," he said finally. "I see it." Bruce stepped closer, his expression open. "You see what?" The director looked up at him. "I see that what I thought looked real, wasn't. It was just what I was used to. What I'd been trained to expect." Bruce didn't gloat. He just nodded. "Most people confuse familiarity with truth," Bruce said quietly. "They think something looks real because they've seen it 100 times before. But repetition doesn't make something true. It just makes it expected." The director smiled faintly, almost to himself. "You're saying I've been making fake fights look real for so long, I forgot what real actually looks like." Bruce's expression softened. "I'm saying Hollywood has its own language. And that language works. But it's not the only language." The director stood, extending his hand. Bruce shook it. "All right," the director said. "We'll do it your way. But you're going to have to work with me on the edit. We need to find a way to make this translate for an audience that's never seen anything like it." Bruce smiled. "I can do that. If this moment landed, don't just move on. Let it sit. Hit like if you felt it." The crew began to pack up for the next setup. The tension that had hung over the soundstage earlier was gone, replaced by a quiet buzz of excitement. People were talking, animated now, replaying what they'd just seen. The stunt performers approached Bruce, shaking his hand, asking questions. One of them laughed, still a little stunned. "Man, I thought I was ready. But when you moved, I forgot everything I'd rehearsed." Bruce grinned. "That's the point. Real speed doesn't give you time to think." Another stunt performer nodded. "I've never felt that in a choreographed scene before. It was like, I don't know. It was just different." "Because it wasn't choreography," Bruce said. "It was a conversation. You reacted. I reacted. That's what makes it real." As the crew continued resetting for the next scene, Bruce stepped off to the side, taking a moment to breathe. His body was relaxed, but his mind was active, reflecting on what had just happened. This wasn't the first time he'd encountered resistance in Hollywood. And it wouldn't be the last. The industry had its rules, its formulas, its expectations. And Bruce respected that. He understood that filmmaking was a collaborative art, that directors had visions, that audiences had preferences. But he also understood something deeper. Authenticity couldn't be faked. You could dress it up. You could slow it down. You could add music and camera angles and dramatic lighting. But if the foundation wasn't real, the audience would feel it. Maybe not consciously. Maybe not immediately. But somewhere deep in their gut, they would know. Dan Inosanto, who had been watching from the sidelines, walked over and stood beside Bruce. "That was something," Dan said quietly. Bruce smiled. "It was necessary." "You think he'll actually use it?" Bruce shrugged. "Maybe. Maybe not. But at least now he's seen it. He knows what's possible." Dan nodded thoughtfully. "You could have argued with him. Explained it all up front." "I could have," Bruce agreed. "But words don't change minds. Experience does." Dan grinned. "One take. That's all it took." "That's all it ever takes," Bruce said. "When you show people the truth, they recognize it. They might not understand it right away. They might resist it. But they can't unsee it." The two men stood in silence for a moment, watching the crew work. "You know," Dan said, "most people would have compromised. Done it the Hollywood way just to keep the peace." Bruce's expression grew more serious. "I'm not here to keep the peace. I'm here to change the game." Dan looked at him, understanding the weight of that statement. Bruce continued, his voice low but firm. "If I compromise on this, then what's the point? I didn't come to Hollywood to be another actor playing martial arts. I came to show people what martial arts really is. And if I let someone else dilute that just to fit their formula, I've already lost." Dan respected that. He had seen Bruce walk away from opportunities before because they didn't align with his vision. Bruce wasn't desperate. He wasn't willing to sell out. He was willing to wait, to fight, to prove himself, on his own terms. Think it'll make a difference? Dan asked. Bruce glanced back at the director, who was now deep in conversation with the cinematographer, gesturing excitedly at the monitor. It already has, Bruce said. The director called out to Bruce from across the set. Lee, come here. I want to talk about how we shoot the next sequence. Bruce exchanged a look with Dan, then walked over. The director was animated now, his earlier skepticism replaced by genuine curiosity. Okay, so if we do it your way, real speed, minimal choreography, we need to rethink the camera work. I'm thinking handheld, close angles, quick cuts. We capture the chaos, the rawness. Bruce nodded. That could work. As long as you don't cut too fast. Let the audience feel the rhythm. Real fights have rhythm, even if they're fast. The director listened, taking notes in his head. What about sound design? If the hits aren't actually landing, we'll need to sell it in post. The sound should be sharp, Bruce said. Not exaggerated. Not cartoon punches. Real impact sounds, crisp, short, brutal. The director was beginning to see the full picture now. This wasn't just about one fight scene. This was a different philosophy of action filmmaking. And if done right, it could set a new standard. You're onto something, the director admitted. I'm not saying it'll be easy to sell to the studio. But I think audiences are ready for something different. Bruce smiled faintly. They're always ready. They just don't know it yet. The director chuckled. All right. Let's finish this scene your way. And if it works, we'll apply it to the rest of the film. Bruce extended his hand. Deal. They shook on it. As Bruce walked back toward his starting mark, he felt a quiet satisfaction. Not because he had won an argument, but because he had planted a seed. And seeds, when given the right conditions, grow into something much larger than the moment they were planted. The assistant director called for positions. The crew fell silent again. Cameras rolled. And Bruce moved. This time, the director didn't flinch. He watched with new eyes, seeing not just the technique, but the truth beneath it. The speed. The precision. The danger. The control. When the take finished, the director didn't hesitate. That's the one, he said. Print it. The crew erupted in quiet applause. The stunt team clapped Bruce on the back. Even the skeptical grips and lighting technicians nodded in approval. Bruce remained calm, humble. He didn't celebrate. He just acknowledged the moment with a slight bow of his head. Because this wasn't about ego. It wasn't about proving he was right. It was about showing people what was possible when you refused to compromise on truth. As the day wrapped and the crew began packing up, Bruce sat quietly in a corner, wiping his face with a towel. Dan sat beside him. You changed that man's mind in 4 seconds, Dan said, shaking his head in disbelief. Bruce smiled. I didn't change his mind. I just showed him something he'd never seen before. The rest was up to him. Dan leaned back, thinking. That's the thing about you, Bruce. You don't force people to see things your way. You just show them the truth, and let them decide. Bruce looked at him, his voice quiet but certain. That's the only way it works. You can't convince someone to believe in something. You can only show them why it's worth believing in. If you're ready to stop performing and start being real, subscribe. This is where we go deeper. Bruce stood, stretching his arms. The soundstage was nearly empty now. The lights were dimming. The day was done. But the impact would last far longer than one take.